Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today we're going to be talking builds for the upcoming Synthesis Flashback League. And one that I want to call out is one of the most unusual and unique skills in the game, Herald of Agony. It's a very versatile skill, and it's a very unusual one in that it just functions differently to basically everything else in the game. It wants you to be inflicting poisons, but it doesn't care how big those poisons are, unlike a dedicated poison build that might use Swift Affliction and a whole series of other gems in order to scale up poison damage. Herald of Agony doesn't care that you're doing 10,000 damage with a hit that poisons or 2 damage with a hit that poisons. All it cares is that you're inflicting poisons. So, like other Herald skills, Herald of Agony reserves 25% of your mana and provides you both a static effect that is always on your character and also a triggered effect that causes your character to do something special when you do something that is provided by the main skill. If we have a quick read through the gem, it really seems to make a lot. It's really quite confusing. There's the obvious part, which is the grants 20% chance to poison on hit and grants 10% more poison damage. Then there's all this talk about an agony crawler and virulence. The way that the mechanic works is that whenever you inflict a poison, you get a buff called virulence that is local only to this skill. So only this skill cares about virulence, and it decays pretty quickly, and it decays exponentially. So if you have 40 stacks of virulence, which is a maximum, you'll drop to 20 in about the same time that it would take to go from 20 to 10 or from 10 to 5. It may not actually be exactly exponential, it may be quadratic decay, but in any case you will notice that it is much quicker to lose your first point of virulence than it is to lose your last. In order to sustain 40 stacks of virulence, which is the maximum possible, you want to be firing off attacks or other skills that can poison as quickly as possible. And just a quick reminder that poison is only able to be done by skills that deal physical and or chaos damage. So you can use a skill that doesn't do physical or chaos damage, such as ball lightning, if you can add physical or chaos damage to that skill via some other means. And there's a lot of ways to do that, and one build that I'll discuss uses Herald of Purity to add physical damage to spells in order to make those spells capable of poisoning. And it particularly chooses to use Firestorm, which is a skill that hits a lot of times. Now, the more virulent stacks that you have, the more damage that this Agony Crawler does. The Agony Crawler is a minion that appears immediately when you gain your first point of virulence. It's pretty weak when you've got 1 point. It's indestructible, and it will attack monsters, and basically it is the way that a Herald of Agony dedicated build clears. So it will be scaled by support gems that are attached to Herald of Agony. For that reason, because the Herald of Agony minion, the Agony Crawler, is immortal, damage on full life is an outstanding support. Minions consider whether they are at full life or not, and damage at full life always applies. So Herald of Agony almost always wants to use damage at full life. It wants to use minion damage. If you can access a level 4 Empower, which is not available early in the league, Empower is a very good choice of support gem for it. Vicious Projectiles is another very good choice of support. But there's also a couple of non-obvious methods of scaling Herald of Agony. And if we have a look down at this gem level progression table, you'll notice that the attack speed on Agony Crawler per virulence does not increase smoothly. So you'll notice that here on the tooltip it says Agony Crawler has 2 to 3% increased attack speed per virulence you have. Now it's 2% if your Agony Crawler if your Herald of Agony gem is level 2 through 10. If it is 11 through 20, you'll get 3%. If you can get it to level 21, then that jumps up to 4%. Keep in mind that you might be running with 35 to 40 virulence during normal mapping. So this is the difference between a 105% increased attack speed bonus for your minion and a 140% increased attack bonus for your minion when you get over the threshold, when you're at 35 virulence. That's huge. Then, if you can get it to level 31, which requires extraordinary gear, we're not talking just good gear here, we are talking truly extraordinary equipment, best in slot bows with double synthesized implicits, all sorts of mad things like that. If you can achieve this goal, then it will go further from 4% per virulence to 5% per virulence. This is a massive breakpoint. And a lot of the very, very wealthiest players that are playing Herald of Agony builds in the Synthesis Softcore League at the moment have put a lot of effort into crafting items that will enable them to reach this breakpoint. So that's some of the ways in which the skill is scaled. Damage on full life support, minion damage support, empower support, vicious projectile support, and getting the skill gem itself over the 21 threshold or ultimately the 31 threshold. And let's quickly talk about how you would hit that level 31 threshold, because it may not be obvious. What you need is a bow that has +1, that has a synthesized implicit of +1 to socketed skill gems, or +1 to socketed dexterity skill gems, and +1 to the level of socketed support gems. These are very expensive synthesis craft, and you will not be able to get this bow without achieving about 50 to 70 exalts in worth of wealth. It's a very expensive item. Once you've done that, you then need to craft a bow with +1 to socketed gems on it, and then Katarina's craft of +2 to socketed support gems. You'll then socket a level 4 Empower, and so that requires the Empower to be corrupted to level 4, and a level 21 Herald of Agony, which means you need to corrupt a level 20 into a 21. This will then give you sufficient skill levels to hit that magic 31 breakpoint. Only even attempt this if you are an extreme power gamer. The 4% breakpoint is much more accessible, and is something that I think that most people that spend any time in maps can acquire a level 21 Herald of Agony reasonably easily. The other things that are important, you need to be inflicting poisons. You get 20% chance to poison on hit from the Herald of Agony support gem itself. You need to be making some sort of attack that is supported by various methods of increasing that to 100%. Some ways of doing that, you can have a weapon that has a mastercraft to add 20% chance to poison on hit on it, and then you can link your primary attack to poison support. The alternative option is to have poison and lesser poison support on your primary attack skill. That will feel wasteful. Lesser poison is generally a pretty weak support gem, but it may just be exactly what you need. I'll let you work out yourself how you want to get it to that 100%. While you're leveling, you can use 80%, which is just Herald of Agony itself and a poison support gem, but at endgame, you definitely want the extra. It's essentially 25% more virulence gains, which is a huge, huge increase to the amount of virulence you can stay at while you're mapping. Other methods of scaling this, there is the unique item, the Golden Rule. This jewel can seem quite unusual. You have a look at it and it seems like, it's giving you armor while you're bleeding. Bleeding you inflict is reflected on you. Plus the chaos resistance per poison on you, and poison you inflict is reflected on you. The thing that's interesting about this item is that inflicting a poison on a monster then inflicts one on you. However, inflicting a poison on yourself via this means actually counts as actually provides virulence, which may seem a little unusual, but it does. So that means that you are doubling your virulence gains if you equip this item. You want to be very careful that you're not killing yourself via either bleed or poison. Bleed's easy to avoid, just don't use any items that would enable you to have a chance to inflict bleed, and then none will be inflicted on you. But poison is going to be inflicted on you regardless, because you're going to be, dishing out a lot of poisons to enemies. For that reason, you want to be careful that you are using this jewel only if you are Chaos Inoculation, and also you need to not be immune to poison for this to work. So you need to be suffering the poisons, but not taking damage from them, and Chaos Inoculation is the way to do this. This unique item is very popular on Occultist builds, and we'll come to Ascendancy choice in a sec. You want to use the aura Hatred. It's actually surprisingly difficult to scale Herald of Agony's the Minion. If you add increased physical damage, let's assume that you're at 30 Virulence at the moment. Increased physical damage will only take the damage that this is dealing. Let's say that you've got plus 400%. Say you've got plus 19% increased damage per Virulence because you're using a level 20 version of the gem. So you've got 570% increased damage for your minion when it is at 30 Virulence. Adding an extra, say, 45% minion damage, it's meaningful. You're going from 570 to 615, but it's just not amazing. So that means that items like bone helmets that give you a percentage increase to minion damage are less impressive than you might think. Granting the Agony Crawler more attack speed through Haste Aura is useful again, but it's not amazing. Agony Crawler deals an enormous amount of physical damage, and this scales with Virulence. This means, again, let's take a level 21 where it's 45 to 84. 45 to 84 is an average, if my maths is correct, of 64.5 per Virulence. Multiply that by 30 and we're talking 1,935 extra added physical damage. If you get added physical damage on an Abyss Duel, that's just not very much damage. You're not really adding much. What you want to do is find ways to give your minions a percentage of their physical damage added as extra damage of some other type, and the Hatred Aura is the best way to do this. You're almost certain to want to run the Hatred Aura if you can fit it in. Keep in mind that using Herald of Agony reserves a lot of mana. It's 25% baseline, but then you're using a bunch of support gems that will increase that by 30% here, 40% there. All of those multiply together. So use Hatred if you can. If you can't, don't be too worried about it. There are also ways to get the Hatred Aura for free. You can use the Essence Worm ring as an option there, or you can use, I believe, one version of All's Uprising unique amulet, which is a very difficult item to acquire. Only comes from the sort of end boss of Delve, who is quite rare to find at all. Now, if you can engineer a situation where you personally don't deal any cold damage with your primary attack that's triggering poison, and if you're using Hatred Aura, you may want to consider Elemental Equilibrium as well. You can then do a very small amount of, say, fire damage, and then have your Hatred, strip the enemy's cold resistance that way, and then have your Agony Crawler come in and hit with its big physical and cold damage attack. So Elemental Equilibrium is a popular option, and I'll leave it up to you as to whether or not you decide to go that way. Whilst most skills mandate that you use a particular attack type, so for instance if you're using Reeve, you're pretty much required to use one-handed weapons. With the Herald of Agony setup, you just need to be inflicting poisons, and you can do this with bows, you can do this with melee, and you can do it with spells. If you choose to go spells, you will want to be adding physical damage to them somehow. You can achieve this by using a Delve-crafted set of gloves that can then have plus physical damage on them. That physical damage will then apply to both attacks and spells. If you want, you can also add physical damage with various Elder Helmets. Will add physical damage to spells. So that's an option. If you're going to go with melee weapons, the most popular option is using claws that have that is to find a fractured claw, ideally a Gemini claw, that has an exceptionally good locked attack speed roll. Ideally you want a Gemini claw of Celebration, but Celebration being the locked mod. Then you will use a Deafening Essence of Fear on that, which adds minion damage, and then you will craft 20% chance to poison on hit. If you're feeling wealthy, you can use that claw. Again, start with a fractured increased attack speed claw, add a Deafening Essence of Fear to it, and then a null down to just the minion damage roll, and multi-mod, including crafting 20% poison on hit. For bows, the budget builds want to use skilled gem level scaling on Herald of Agony. So you're putting your Herald of Agony into your bow, and then you're using other attacks, attacks that are put in other item slots to trigger it. Budget builds try to get 21, but you want as high as you can get. So start with 21, but do work on getting 22, 23, 24, 25 via various means, empower, by crafting your bow to give plus to levels of dexterity gems and things like that. And the extreme min-max, the huge jump, is going from 30 to 31. If you can get that, you're set. In terms of Ascendancy choice, if you have a look at PoE.Ninja and look at the characters that list Herald of Agony, that have Herald of Agony as a 5+ link skill, you'll see that there's a number of popular Ascendancy choices: Occultist, Gladiator, Juggernaut, Champion, Pathfinder, Guardian, and then to a lesser extent, Ascendant and Raider. So let's go through these. Occultist is tanky, it's energy shield based, and so very good with the Golden Rule, and it has its curses, and I think it's the default choice. Occultist is in a very good place at the moment, and it synergizes well with what Herald of Agony is trying to do. Juggernaut is the next option I would recommend. Accuracy is completely solved. You don't need to find accuracy anywhere else on a Juggernaut. Your actual attack that you're triggering that you're triggering poisons with will pretty much always hit. It's tanky, not quite as tanky as an Occultist, but very tanky, and it attacks fast. Gladiator and Raider I'm going to put in one category. These are the classes that stack one particular defense that is not usually used very much and stack it very high. Gladiator stacks block, Raider stacks dodge. With these builds, you dedicate your entire tree and gear to getting as much of that defense as you can, and then you let Herald of Agony do the other work. Next we have Pathfinder. Pathfinder has the best Virulence uptime due to a specific node that it's got that interacts only with Herald of Agony. I'm not a fan of it myself. I think the build has the worst defenses of any Herald of Agony build, and I personally don't like it, but by all means, feel free to give it a try. I'm not always right on these questions. Lastly, there is a Champion, which has accuracy, and which basically solves the accuracy question and allows you to get Fortify with bows. There's a couple of more niche choices as well. Necromancer, Assassin, and Trickster have been played to level 95 by some people in the current league. I'm not personally a fan of those builds, and you'll see there's only 3 people for each of them that have got a level 95 or higher character of that Ascendancy. But by all means, feel free to try these out and prove me wrong. Anyways, if you've got any questions, it's a really interesting skill, and it's one I'm considering playing in the Flashback. If you've got any questions, fire them away. Otherwise, have a good one.